Hello and welcome back to this special episode of the podcast series that we're doing from the Financial Planning Association Conference. I am joined by Matt Jones. Thank you for joining me, Matt.
Great to be with you, Fraser.
Now tell the listeners about your claim to fame.
Well, I think the one you're referring to, well, probably my only one, frankly, has been co-founder of Four Pillars Gin. If I sound out of breath at the moment, it's also because we're sitting in the middle of the Four Pillars bar and we have been smashed for the last 90 minutes non-stop. So
yeah, this has been an amazing experience for those people who weren't here. You have actually been creating cocktails or creating a drink for us to all have a sip at behind on the tools, I would say.
I made the huge mistake of ending my presentation with a live cocktail demonstration on stage, which seems to have attracted quite a lot of people to have that cocktail as well.
That is not a huge mistake by any means. So for somebody who has just sampled the goods, tell us a little bit about your background. 10 years in Four Pillars? Yeah,
look, we're 10 years of playing with Four Pillars. We turn 9 in terms of our time on the market on the 4th of December. It was 4th of December 2013 that we launched, but we were toying with it from, I guess, sort of mid-2012, got serious towards the end of 2012. Early 2013, we send my two co-founders, Stu and Cam, off on a little fact-finding mission and really, put some money in the bank, put an order down on a still, and, things get serious.
Yeah, things do get serious. And I think probably from a point of view, you're entering a marketplace where there wasn't a lot of boutique gin distilleries around in Australia.
Look, there were fewer than 20 gin distilleries, and the majority were probably distilleries that made other things, including gin. So maybe a rum distillery here, a whiskey distillery in Tasmania. So there were a few different gin labels. There wasn't really an Australian gin scene. What there was a new craft gin movement happening overseas. Hadn't happened here really yet. And frankly, there probably wasn't much demand for it to happen here yet. So you had to be very realistic about, we think there's exciting possibility, but it's not exactly, pent-up demand that's just waiting for someone to bring Australian gin to the market.
Yeah, this is what the Henry Ford says. If you ask people what they want, they're going to ask you for faster horses. Or
yeah, and I don't think anyone was going to say at that stage a great Australian gin.
Yeah, fair enough. That wasn't on the cards. Tell us a little bit about that process, though, because you had to work through, and from a business point of view, obviously we're talking about gin, but we're talking about a business, right? And a business where the market doesn't exist. So, well, the craft, I guess the high quality gin market existed, but the craft market didn't.
Yeah, look, I mean the high quality gin market was definitely there. It was dominated by Hendrick's. There was a much bigger, sort of rather tired old gin market, classic London dry gins. The craft gin scene was definitely growing in the US. It was growing in the UK, and I think how you go about building a business, there's obviously no one right answer, and if you have an impatient desire and need to achieve growth, you can perhaps approach it in one way. We were fortunate in Four Pillars in that from the outset, we wanted to play the long game and play the quality game. And we really challenged ourselves to see what would happen if we made something to an exceptional standard, where we placed craft at the center. And I remember having a conversation very early on with Stu and Cam, my co-founders, saying, look, we're going to be a craft business, and craft has no scale limit. There'll be people who will tell us that craft means small, and therefore after a certain size you're not craft anymore. We say, well, it's not that. Craft is just a total commitment to quality. And in theory, you can be a global brand, and there are great examples of global brands that retain that sense of quality at the heart. They're just rare, and more commonly you see these big brands where quality is perhaps being pushed to one side a little bit. So I don't think our business model is right for everyone. We really prioritized product quality, and we took it slow, and members of the FPA will be interested that we put enough money aside in the bank to make sure that we didn't have to get impatient for short-term returns and start running sales promotions, because that way lies a very short-termist approach to building a brand. But instead we really sort of prioritize getting the product right, packaging the product right, getting all those cues of quality and excellence, and then over time seeing where can that take us?
Yeah, I want to harp on this craft idea a little bit longer, because craft can mean, small and boutique and doing things, but then to scale craft is a whole new story. But I think what you focus on was mastering the craft.
Look, I think so. Something I often say, the world doesn't need another anything. The world needs a better something. There's always a market for a better something. And I think your craft is your opportunity to unlock what it is that you can do or make better. It doesn't have to be everything. It might be that you're running a financial advisory practice that's just exceptional at client experience, or you're running a financial advisory practice that's just exceptional at dealing with older people who've not prepared for their retirement and now they're in the middle of it, and that's what you're really good at. Your craft is that deep mastery, as you say, of the thing that's then going to unlock your opportunity to add value. I think what can then happen to a lot of businesses as they grow, they start to realize that some of those things that drove their craft are expensive, and maybe there are easier paths, but that doesn't mean they're better paths, and probably in the long run that's going to dilute the craft and dilute the mastery and dilute the value. So I think there is a hard road to growth, which is holding on to the craft, but ultimately it's surely got to be a more rewarding road to growth.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And certainly sampling the beverages tonight, there's definitely a reward at the end of it. But before we go there, you presented today. You had a presentation on stage, a keynote to finish the day.
Yep. So, I'm very fortunate. I enjoy speaking and I get to do it a fair bit. And I always see it as my job to hopefully tell a success story, because I think 4 Pillars is absolutely a work in progress, but it's a really fun one, and we've got some runs on the board, and it's nice to be able to share that and say, look what Australia can do. But I also see it as my job to connect some of the lessons that we've learned, the principles we've followed, and help other organisations and other people connect with them. Because at the end of the day, most of us are not making gin, we're not making cocktails, but we are creating something, and that something needs to be wrapped in great storytelling and great experiences if we're going to make the most of it. So that's what I chatted about today, the dual challenge of really mastering your craft, but then recognizing that alone is not enough. That if you don't then really do justice to the value you create in the stories you tell and the experiences you provide to your clients, then you're leaving value on the table. You're leaving it to chance that your clients will tell the story you wish they would tell about you, and will take responsibility for that. Tell them the story and give them experiences that make it almost non-negotiable that they'll go away and they'll preach the gospel of your business and the experience that they have with you. So that was the lessons I hope that people took from today.
Yeah, as business, there's very much those, as you said, those principles across different businesses, and whether they're a financial advice business or a gin distillery, a lot to learn in that space. Tell us a little bit about some of those principles. We talked about things like sandwiches and peacocks and all these sort of things in the presentation. So
I had a bit of a strange route into gin that started as an economist, moved into politics, and ended up in the brand space. And the part of the brand world that I was in was this sort of emerging world of brand experience agencies. And it was a really interesting time. I entered that world in 2006. So if you cast your mind back, and you and I are probably just about old enough to remember the digital world then, we're pre-social media. Facebook technically launched in 2004. Most of us got accounts 2010, 2011. The iPhone only launched in 2007. It took a while for 3G to catch up and put social media in your pocket. So working in the brand experience space in 2006 through to 2012, and fortunately it took me to New York for a little while, we were really at a time when businesses were realizing that the experiences they created would be talked about by so many more people and put in the sort of the social media shop window by their customers. And what I've spent a lot of time thinking about then is, well, what are the types of experiences that change how people talk about you, that change how people behave? And sandwiches and peacocks is a simple way that I've used over the years to articulate two, if you like, mental models. The sandwich model is all about how can you become easier to do business with, easier to buy, easier to continue to transact with, easier to roll over. And you see it from Amazon to Netflix to Uber, these businesses that are just trying to eliminate friction, because they recognize if they've got you as a customer and they can eliminate friction, you're never going to leave. So if we think as businesses, where are the points of friction, pain, annoyance for our clients? How can we sand them away and smooth them down? That's sandwich thinking. The challenge is your competitors are probably seeing the same things as you. They're seeing the same pain points, and technology is making it easier and easier for people to eliminate pain points. So, 4 Pillars, we've just invested in a super fancy new customer experience solution that means we can get back to more people with their inquiries faster. 5 years ago, that would cost us millions of dollars of tech stack investment, and today it's an off-the-shelf solution and it's in the low tens of thousands. So sandwich thinking is important, but it's easy to replicate, which is where the peacock comes in. The peacock is my analogy for being colourful and noisy and memorable. And I think every brand, I think about accounting, Xero. Did anyone think that accounting software needed to get sexy? But Xero went, well, wait a minute, people who do the books and do the accounts and look at software every day, they'd rather look at something beautifully designed. And they've really carved out a niche there. And I think there's room for design, aesthetics, beauty, storytelling to make all of us feel something in any business. And so that's that real encouragement it's not that you shouldn't be focused on quality, because as we discussed, it's critical, but don't overestimate how rational people are. Remember, we respond to emotion, we respond to story, we're hardwired that way. And so where can that show up, those peacock moments in your business, and where can you create value through that way of thinking as well?
Yeah, I 100% agree about the people make those emotional decisions, and those are the things that those memorable moments that you create in a business is so important for from consumers to be able to share with others about, not the technical stuff, especially in financial advice. It's about those magical moments that they go, I felt something.
And often it's the two are actually complementary. So I think about why at 4 Pillars I've always cared so much about design, photography, packaging, labels. And it's because all of those things give our customers a hint of how much we care about quality and attention to detail. And if I could force them to watch Cameron distill a batch of gin for 8 hours, they would get it. But I can't do that. And so how do I give them little cues? How do I drop little breadcrumbs to say, look how much we care? It's the same in the financial planning space. If we want to be trusted, trust is a feeling. If we want to give our clients confidence that we've got their backs, how do we convey confidence in the typefaces we choose, in the clarity with which we convey information? So the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. We think about, well, what's the craft we want to be known for? What's the trust we want to be built? What do we want to be trusted at? And then how do we use things like design or environmental design? If we bring someone in for a financial planning conversation and we know we're going to ask them questions about their children and their ambitions and their retirement, how do we create a waiting room space that gets people thinking about the right things with the right visual cues, the right environment, the right coffee? It might sound trivial, but taking care of those details. That's why Apple stores are such incredible places where you and I are happy to spend far more money on a laptop than we had to spend on the equivalent PC, because Apple gives us a feeling of trust and confidence in the hardware and the ecosystem. So yeah, I think that stuff is critical, and it's not sort of saying craft is not important to say that also those experiences are really important.
Yeah, now one of the things I love about your presentation was we did talk about the sandwiches and the peacocks, and they were all important, but they always linked back to the core values of that you put down at the beginning. Yeah,
so look, I think it gets easier to do all of that when you know why you're doing it. And, we've all heard Simon Sinek talk about start with why. And there's lots of different theories out there about what your purpose should be. Some people would say, purpose is all about bigger picture, social, higher purpose. How is your business helping to save the world? For me, it's more just about giving yourselves decision-making tools to go, why does our business exist, and why will it grow? Why will it succeed? Why will we be valued by our clients? So for 4 Pillars, it's all about taking the opportunity that is given to us of making gin in Australia. And that has led us to go, well, if we exist to elevate the craft of distilling gin because we're here in Australia, it helps us decide not to make vodka, not to make whiskey. Because if our job is to elevate gin making, then it's probably not to get up one day and go, we've done gin now, let's make something else. But then it also helps you with so many other decisions and investments, because fundamentally you've got that clarity of why you exist and why you matter and why you're doing this.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, 10 years on from making gin, we also covered some of the other stuff around sustainability, around the fact that you reuse the oranges that come out of the vats to make marmalade, all these sorts of things. But that's then also evolved in some other stuff within your business.
Look, it has, and there's always been this sense of never compromise on the fundamental quality of the gin. And that meant that in the early days, our sustainability efforts were always about what can we do on the margin? So can we put solar on our roof? Yes. Can we be smart with our water usage? Can we take the water that gets heated from our stills and use it to heat the distillery in winter? Absolutely. So let's be smart. And can we take the oranges and the botanicals and turn them into marmalade and salt and chocolate? Absolutely. The game changer, though, was in developing our growing distillery. We effectively developed the site next door to double the size of it. That's more Christmas gin drinks being delivered.
Yeah, very happily.
And there we were able to make some really big decisions on sustainability. We've wrapped the whole site in this incredible copper fence, copper veil, which is effectively a close to 2 kilometre passive water cooling chimney that is saving tens of thousands of litres of water every day. So we've been able to make big decisions, partly because we've got a bit more money in our pockets, partly because we can start with a blank canvas. But the critical thing is always, what can we do that's the right thing to do while not compromising the core craft? And one more thing. Every investment we make in that space, we try and get a return from it in terms of storytelling. So the first thing we did after completing those things, and we got certified carbon neutral, we won this incredible accolade at the International Wine and Spirits Competition in London to win their inaugural Green Spirits Initiative trophy. Immediately, we got a camera crew out there with a filmmaker that we love and said, right, make the film of what we've done, because we need to tell people about this, because it's only when we get the credit for it, we're not going to distort it, we're going to tell the truth of what we've done, but it's our job. We've done this thing, it's valuable, let's now get the return from that. And I think that's maybe the critical piece that brings it all together.
Absolutely. When you've got a good story to tell, you should definitely get out there and start telling. And I think financial advisors are in that space as well. Matt Jones, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for being here at the FPA Congress in Sydney. I know you've had to travel to be here, and I appreciate you being some time away from your family. Thank you so much for sharing with us all your words of wisdom.
Absolutely. And look me up on LinkedIn, Matt Jones, 4 Pillars Gin, and always happy to connect and thrilled to be here. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our special podcast series brought to you by XY and the FPA, coming to you from the Financial Planning Association Conference in Sydney. I'm joined again this morning by Danni. Good morning, Danni.
Good morning, Fraser. We are day 2. We are halfway through an amazing sharing of ideas at the FPA's 30th birthday.
Yeah, fantastic.
And we've got our first podcast victim at the podcast bar. Thanks for kicking things off, Paul.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
So, Paul, you spoke yesterday.
Yep.
So we've just learnt in the small amount of time that we've spoken with you before the podcast that you're a bit of an overachiever. You like to do a lot of things. Would you, before we get into your session and what that covered, would you mind telling the listeners a bit about you, how you built an advice business and obviously a technology business as well?
Yep.
And got in a thesis in there as well. There were 3 big things that we're going to cover in this podcast.
Yeah. Look, I guess if I go right back to not the very start, but a long way back, in a previous life, I was an ambulance paramedic for about a decade in the 80s, 90s, and the thing I realised, I worked as a country ambo for a few years, and I kept hearing this phrase all the way through my career, which was whenever you arrived at, no matter what you arrived at, people would say, "Oh, it's okay, the ambulance is here now." Didn't matter what was happening, how terrible, what amount of crap was going on. The ambulance is here now, it's okay, right? And I took from that what they were saying is, I don't know what to do. I'm in chaos, right? And so someone here knows what to do. They've got the uniform on. They know what to do. This idea of chaos to calm became the sort of mantra for our practice that we started. It's our practice motto. So when clients come and see financial advisors, I think they come in a chaotic situation, panicking, worried, upset, don't know what they're going to do, fearful. And so our job is to know what to do. And I think that's the job of financial planners, to know what to do, right? So we've made that motto. So it's around kind of...
Does that mean we can call financial planners first responders now? Is that
absolutely.
Is this official?
Absolutely.
You've tagged it? Okay, great.
Yeah.
And a first responder, first podcaster. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
And you started that 25 years ago, is that right? Yeah.
That's right. I think the job's very similar. I think there's a process we go through. Right? All financial planners should go through a similar process, maybe in different ways, but there's a process that they go through. Getting to know the client first, understanding that, and then working out what strategy they should be doing, work out what the gaps are, and then following a format, a process approach, just like AMBOs do. And so consequently, that led me much later into the idea of getting the client information much more accurately, much more efficiently, so we've got somewhere to go. So hence we started the software business called FactFind about 4.5 years ago.
Yeah, you decided to start while you were doing a whole lot of other things at the same time. Now you're in the middle of a thesis.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you love the hectic life.
I love education. So I've got a couple of master's degrees and a couple of degrees, and I just really want to take that last step and get a thesis. So I did a master's in tax and master's in financial planning at Uni of New South Wales in about 2009, 2011. Finished that. There's a fairly big group there into behavioural finance, and so I sort of got interested in it, and I took myself off to a conference in Chicago. There's an Academy of Behavioural Finance conference, and I didn't know it was sold there, but everyone crowded around me, and I didn't know what the hell, I don't know what's going on here, but it was my accent, and not the Aussie accent, but they wanted to know at that stage what it was like to live in a country where people still thought property prices couldn't fall. So post GFC, when around the world house prices fallen 50%, ours had to dip for a week and then rebounded up. And it got me thinking a lot about that, and so I wanted to look at that in more detail, and hence I kind of applied and got accepted to start a thesis for a doctorate. So
yeah, a fascinating topic. Tell us a little bit about that process. How did you go through your thesis as in how did you set, what did you decide on would be you were going to study?
Yeah.
And tell us about the outcome.
Yeah, so what that was really about was a belief I had, or a belief, which is a important word in the thesis, but a sense that people were at the time it got worse, but people were spending so much of their financial resource on property, on residential real estate, spending so much money on it. They were saying things to me like, I can't afford insurance. What do you mean? I've got a big mortgage. I can't afford extra super payments because I've got a big mortgage. And sort of why are they putting all of their resources into this one asset that they live in? You know, and then bidding prices up. So going to auctions and actively bidding against other people doing the same thing. So no sense of this house is worth $800,000 or $1 million. If someone wants to pay 1.2, good on them. It became, I'm going to pay 1.3, or else I have to pay 1.4 next week. So this sort of idea of prices only ever go up, I've got to get in now. So what was causing that? And
they certainly wouldn't do that with an insurance policy or premium, would they? No. It's worth $800. I'll pay $1,200 for it.
It's bid it up. Can I have it?
Yeah, they're doing it with a car now.
Yeah, they are.
But they normally wouldn't do it. You normally would. You go and bargain for things, right? You go and say, like, I'm going to buy this. I'll give you a letter. They bargain with it. But with a house, it was like, I'll pay whatever I've got to pay. And so I wanted to know what was that about. And so over a period of a couple of years, I did a doctorate in a professional doctorate, so Doctor of Business Administration. It's still a thesis and but it's a professional doctorate, which is a lot more practically orientated. A PhD is a real theoretical approach. Whereas a professional doctorate is a more applied approach to research. So I wanted to look at so what I sort of started to stumble across, aside from going through the whole behavioural finance elements of stuff and becoming really, I think pretty expert in behavioural finance from reading about 500 papers. That the idea of beliefs, what are the beliefs behind this, and the influence became significant around the beliefs around past performance. So I set up a survey, and the study was involving a survey of really framing people's investment preferences by both past performance and then by future expected return, and seeing there was differences, and there were very big differences between the two. So if you ask someone straight up, what's your preferred investment? How I did it was studying 3 options. I studied the first option was residential real estate, second was Australian shares, and the third was superannuation. Now, superannuation, I know, is not an asset class, it's a tax structure, but in the general public's mind, superannuation is a thing. So it is the same as residential real estate and Australian shares in the public's mind. They don't see that as a tax structure, they see it as an investment thing. So the survey asked questions around that. What's your preferred investment of the 3? And what do you think had done best over the previous 3 and the previous 10 years? And seeing a relationship between those sort of factors. And there was a pretty strong relation between those things. But people most people thought residential real estate had done best. In fact, we polled the audience yesterday, and they said the same thing. They thought residential real estate had done the best. In fact, residential real estate... What
sort of swing of, the audience here, but what sort of, in your research, what was
around 45% thought real estate had done best.
Okay.
And Australian shares worse than superannuation second. And in fact, the actual results were reversed. So I did research what was the best performing asset class over the 10-year period that I did the study, and to now, and residential real estate was the worst performing, because people ignore the fact that it's geared at 80%. So what they see is I've put I bought a house worth $800,000, it's become 1.2, it's grown by $400,000, and my money's gone, but that's only a 3 or 4% return over a 5 or 6 year period, whereas the share market had done 7 or 8 or 9% return over that period. The super had done 6 or 7% over that return. So there was a pretty clear relationship between belief around past performance, even though it was wrong. So 60% of people got it wrong, but the influence for residential real estate was if you believed that it had done best, you were 6 times more likely to want to invest in real estate than anything else. So really heavy influence. So then in the survey, I then asked them to predict what the returns would be in the next 10 years. I gave them a list of outcomes. So let's say, for example, I would ask a question like, say you inherited $180,000, but the proviso was you had to invest in a superannuation fund of your choice. Okay, what do you think it would grow to in 10 years' time? And I gave them 7 options of little ranges, like 170 to 210, and each of those ranges, the midpoint equated to 0 to 4, 6, 8, 10, or 12% compound returns. Okay, and then got them to predict, and then asked them, okay, after having done that, now what's your preferred investment? And materially changed. So the people who preferred investment halved. Okay, the people who preferred superannuation or shares increased by about 25% each. So it became apparent to me that framing investment choice based on past performance versus expected future return was very significantly different.
When I think about this from the uneducated point of view, but I'm thinking about it from points of view of conversations that I've had in the past. It's those beliefs tend to be there for a very long time. They're cultural beliefs or beliefs of parents growing up and from an early age. And how is it that people can change those beliefs by just a bit of logical evidence versus that emotional connection that they've got to it?
I'm sure they don't change the belief. If I really asked them, they'd probably still say property doubles every 7 years, right? That's the heuristic people go by. Therefore, I can't lose on property. The people will say this all the time. But the reality is that when you're faced with a number on a page, and especially if you've pushed the buttons on the calculator, which I sort of said yesterday, if you get the clients to push the buttons on the calculator, don't you do it, you get them to push the buttons, and they see the outcome, and they see what return that really means, then they suddenly realise that doesn't sound right to me. So there's a really material difference between the two. So,
yep.
I'd be really, and your research probably didn't flex into this, but perhaps you have an opinion, Paul, there's beliefs are one thing, but is property preferred, do you think, because there's that element of identity with property. I own all of these properties and they're, things that I can talk around, whereas perhaps there isn't that... There isn't that ownership, your status. Symbol. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for early in the morning. Is there's a status element of having a number of properties, whereas if you just have a share portfolio, it doesn't seem as So what you're really saying is boasting about it? Correct. Right? Well, so I'm important because I've got 4 properties versus a big share portfolio. So
there's something else we looked at is kind of the impact. How am I going to say this? So one of the things we talked about yesterday was prospect theory. So one of the key behavioural finance theories, in fact, it's not the key, but it's the most popular, the most commonly known, Tversky and Kahneman's prospect theory. But one of the side effects, prospect theory basically says people feel losses significantly more than they enjoy gains in an emotional scale, right? It's often talked about twice as much, but there's no evidence it's a scale of twice to 1, but there's more. But there's a kind of less commonly known side bit of prospect theory, which kind of gets ignored, and that is when people are facing almost certain losses, they become risk-seeking, right? So when people are facing almost certain losses, they don't know they are, but they become risk-seekers.
Hence the reason the casino makes money from gamblers. Yeah.
Yep. So this is exactly like I've lost $100 at the pokies. I better keep playing to win that money back, right? So I'm looking for more and more risk all the time. Now, I think I became interested in relative loss, okay, not just actual loss, and relative loss is exactly what you're talking about. If I've got friends who've got 3 investment properties and I haven't, I feel like I've lost compared to them, right? And I better do that. Yeah. So the boasting about I've got 3 investment properties, aren't I great, has an impact on all the friends who haven't got 3 investment properties. It makes them want to feel like I'm going to take more risk now. I'm going to do something else to take more risk. And so I talk about young non-homeowners are highly at risk of prospect theory in that sense, because I've got to pay whatever it takes to get into the market. Right? Doesn't matter. I've got mum and dad, give me some more money. I need, I'll lie to the bank. I want to borrow more money. I'm going to give myself as much as I possibly can because I'm risk seeking without any sense. When we see people now who in their 50s have debt that they will never repay in their lifetime, more and more people are absolutely relying on inheritances to get out of debt. I
feel like people in property are more likely to ignore the downside, as in they would go, the market's going up, my house is now worth that. But when there's a downside, they just ignore it because they'll know they feel like it will come back. Whereas I guess with market prices being so prominent, this is the exact value of your super fund as of today. It's a bit more in their face.
Yeah, look, you can't tell on the podcast, but I'm old. And I was around in 1989 when house prices fell around 25%. We had a big recession that we had to have at the time, but literally house prices fell around 25%. Now, the only people who noticed that were people who had to sell. If I didn't sell, house prices didn't fall. Yeah, they did. They fell about 25%, but no one experienced that unless they had to sell.
Nobody felt the pain.
The ones who had to sell because they'd lost their jobs and couldn't pay the mortgages, when interest rates hit 18%, they really felt the pain. They lost everything at that stage. And there's people around who still experience that. But if I didn't have to sell, then I didn't really notice it.
Yeah.
And so, at the moment, we've had this period of really, really ultra-low interest rates, emergency low, never be foreseen low interest rates, but it becomes normalised really quickly. And so we're getting interest rates where at the moment, which still aren't normal. So a 5% mortgage rate is still very low, but people are panicking about a 5% interest rate.
Yes.
Right? So
well, I think there's a little bit of media in that too, with regards to they're just focusing on the increase.
Yeah.
Paul, thanks so much for coming on today's conversation. If someone wanted to continue that conversation with you and have a look at that research that you've done, what's probably the best way that they could reach out to you?
They can probably email me if they want to. Certainly, if they're at the Congress listening to the podcast, we're at the stand at the iFactFind stand. But otherwise, they can looking at Paul at ifactfind.com.au is the easiest place to catch me. So
wonderful. Yeah. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks for chatting, Paul.
My pleasure. Great. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this podcast series we're doing from the Financial Planning Association Congress. I'm joined by Danni. Thank you for joining me, Danni.
Thanks, Fraser. I'm still here. It's a mini series, but there's lots of episodes within the mini series.
Absolutely.
Covered 17 conversations yesterday. Is that right, Fraser?
Not so many. Do you want to introduce our next guest on the podcast?
We have Ben Martian, so Head of Policy. Is that the correct term, Head of Policy at the FPA?
I've actually had a title change. So
have you? Should I start that again then?
No.
Because that's how I've always known you, Ben.
Well, yeah, no. So I'm technically the General Manager of Policy and Advocacy, but I like my old title, which was Head of Policy, Strategy and Innovation, because I like the strategy.
Ben, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
New title, new role, same position, same job.
Same job.
Amazingly, everything,
Yep.
Ben will do it. You will also get dubbed within the Financial Planning Association as the guy who loves technology. So anything that there's technology involved, Ben will take care of it.
It's more Well, when you're reading 300 pages of legislation and writing 150-page submissions to government and regulators, you need something to keep you sane, and technology is that for me.
Fantastic. And so one of the sessions we want to talk about in this...
It's close to your heart as well,
selfishly,
Fraser.
I want to talk about it, is one of the sessions that came on the day before the Congress started.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that session.
So we have been running training sessions for members on doing video SOAs. And the idea there is that if you have a look at ASIC's Regulatory Guide 90, what they say is that they're technology neutral. And Fraser and I worked 2.5 years ago on a paper called The Future of the SOA. And we tried to encourage everybody to use digital tools to better engage their clients. And I think with COVID, Royal Commission implementations, everyone's gotten really busy. So what we wanted to do was go really extreme. What's the cheapest and most efficient and most engaging way to provide an SOA to the client that's legal? And video is it. And I was reflecting yesterday in the gin session that we had.
That would have been interesting reflections.
It was, and I probably reflected a bit more on the quality of the gin later in the night.
The Christmas one was my favourite.
Yeah,
It was my
But
favourite.
I'm feeling it a little today.
Yes, it is early this morning. And he was talking about the sandwich theory, and he was talking about the fact that people don't like to cross the road to buy a sandwich. And what we do in financial planning is we spend 10 to 15 hours making a sandwich that nobody wants to eat. So the video SOA is the sandwich theory, that the most efficient way to document the advice that you're providing to a client is to record it when you tell the client. So as long as you meet the 8 requirements of a statement of advice.
I love the word document as a documentary.
Yes.
Let's document it on film, not necessarily on paper. I think that's certainly something that is something that people can get their head around. I also refer to the document of advice being the document of advice and a statement being the words that come out of your mouth.
Yeah.
Now, the statement of advice is one of those things that's a regulatory disclosure requirement. There's lots of moving pieces to that puzzle. For example, you need to make sure you've got a basis of advice and you know your client. You've got to make sure that you've scoped the advice appropriately. You've got to make sure you cover off on strategy and product and how you selected product, and you've got to make sure you talk about fees and all the other things. So how do planners do that then in the process of a video? I mean, one of the, I think the key takeaways that you've spoken about a lot is the fact that it's not a pre-prepared video.
No, it's not a pre-prepared video. So when you're in that meeting with the client where you're providing the recommendations to them and you're talking through the strategies and you're talking through the products, as long as you hit the 8 points that you need to in an SOA, then you have met your disclosure obligations in terms of the SOA. The only really tricky one is how you put a cover page on an SOA with the title statement of advice with your AFSL number and who's providing the advice. But if you get past that one, you will go through the client's financial position, you'll go through their goals and objectives, you'll go through the strategies, you'll go through the products, you'll talk about the benefits and disadvantages of those. If you're replacing one product with another, you'll have that conversation with the client, you'll have a conversation about fees. And if you're doing all that, then you meet all your regulatory obligations in terms of the SOA. And so the only thing that you probably want to think about, and your licensee might want you to think about, is how you make sure you cover off all of those things. And so what we've done is created an agenda that is just a plain slide deck which you can make look really good. You could print it out and put it on the table and make sure you go through the points. You could create it into a presentation. You could build it into your software flow. But it makes sure that you go through all the points you need to cover off all your regulatory obligations.
Yeah.
It was interesting. We were speaking to Corey yesterday, who's now started to embed the video SOA. So he has saved, was it 6 hours in that process?
Yeah, dramatically changed their advice process.
And it was
and
really,
the scalability of advice as well.
And he was sort of talking around how it was really nice where finally there's a space where the client experience and great advice can actually lead the process rather than a compliance framework. So that's, I mean, how is the adoption? Like, are there people taking up the ideas? What's the adoption of this SOA in video form?
So we've had around 140 planners come through the training sessions that Fraser and I have run over the last 12 months or so.
That's a lot of hours potentially saved.
That is a lot of hours. And we've got a great community of planners who are helping each other and having conversations about how to get their compliance teams across this, how to get their PI insurers across it, what technology they're using. And we're seeing a lot more members out of that 140 start to actually produce video SOAs for their clients. And the feedback we're getting is that depending on how long it takes to edit up the document, they're saving 10 to 15 hours per client in the advice process, which is probably seeing another 2 to 3 clients a week.
Awesome.
Even a day in doing that and saving all that back office time and effort. And the clients love it. Because as much as people kind of go, are clients really going to be comfortable watching a video back? People actually love watching videos of themselves. That's why we have mobile phones, and that's why we take videos of our experiences.
Selfies.
They're
all the thing in Bondi where I live.
But it's also the fact that when we talk about watching a video of themselves, it's rewatching the video, right? Because they were already in the conversation in the first place. They experienced 100% of the advice. It's not like they didn't read the document of advice. That they can't get away with saying, I didn't know it, or you didn't tell me at the time, because they were there. They experienced it.
And different learning styles as well. Like if hearing how someone speaks or reading something is not your learning style, and it's not my learning style, I'm a very visual learner. It's very difficult to take a lot of information in when it's presented in a way that doesn't absorb. So having this video SOA and thinking how you include it into your software flow, as you said, Ben, is you can get really creative with adapting it to that person's learning style, because you really want them to understand the advice given.
Absolutely. And Michelle Levy was talking about it yesterday on stage. She was talking about the fact that the current legislative framework creates this process flow, and it says who can provide advice and who can't, and what documents you have to provide the client and what your conduct obligations are. And she says it doesn't make sense. What the client wants is advice. And the real way the client gets the advice is when you speak to them and you have the conversation with them and you make the recommendations to them and they say, yes, that makes sense to me, or no, that doesn't make sense to me, let's change this around. That's when advice is provided.
Yeah, I really think that from a consumer point of view, there's two things they want. They want advice, but they want a plan. They want a financial plan. And most people come in thinking that they're going to get a financial plan. And when they see a document, they think, oh, that must be my plan. And people have said to me, and we've had a lot of, but what about that conversations over the years, and people have great objections, which are all worth exploring. And even right now, planners say to me, look, I think my clients would still want some sort of paper, and I'm thinking, well, do a plan, give them a plan, what they paid for.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and so if we get back, if we've done the disclosure requirements in the conversation, then a document, and we're talking about a paper or a visual piece of paper that it might be online, but it might be able to be printed, could still be something that's a lot more visual and be more around their plan rather than the disclosure requirements.
Absolutely. And part of the problem with 80-page, 100-page SOAs is an A4 piece of paper restricts you in how you communicate with clients. Whereas if you provide them with a plan, there's lots of technology solutions that give you an infinite canvas. You can make that plan as big or as little as what you need, and the client can zoom in and zoom out and engage with it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I think one of the big blocks with a lot of the technology providers out there has been trying to convert that content that they're creating, or the graphs they're creating, or the data that they're producing into a document. And if you're avoiding that piece, you can still demonstrate on a visual screen in a beautiful way what that projection might look like, or that strategy outcome might look like, or that product selection might look like on a screen, rather than having to then convert it to an A4 piece of paper.
That's right, and I think even technology is guilty of this. They're guilty of creating a process and creating tools and creating solutions that they think consumers want, but what they're actually producing is what licensees want. Iris yesterday was on stage talking about the fact they got 2,500 screens that a financial planner can go through when they're talking to their clients about advice. That's not what clients want. Clients just want to know how they can meet their goals and objectives. They just want to know how the strategies are going to make their life better. And, some of them are going to understand salary sacrifice, and some of them you're going to have to talk through the process.
One of the things I really enjoyed through this process, Ben, is the fact that there's been no legislative change required to do this.
No.
We're not waiting on the legislation changes. There's been no different technology systems have to be prepared. Everyone's currently using Zoom or Teams, and they know how to record a meeting.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's exactly what we're pointing to. You can, in the conversation you have with the client, you meet all your SOA obligations. To your point, Fraser, we're already using Zoom. You just need to make sure you got a camera that picks up you and picks up the client. You need to have a microphone that picks up the conversation, and you need to record the screen to show them the information you need to show them, and you're done.
Yep.
And ASIC, we've got ASIC coming at a session shortly. I'm going to ask Leah Shucker from ASIC, the lead of advice at ASIC, is video SOA all right? And I know she's going to say yes, because we've had that conversation that many times. The regulator says they're technology agnostic. As long as you meet your obligations, then it doesn't matter how you document your advice.
You started this process many years ago, like talking around the video SOA. Has the regulator always been as supportive, or has that been the journey that you've taken? Like from the beginning, did they say, yes, we're agnostic on how this is delivered? Like, what's that journey been like?
So in 2017, ASIC redid RG90, and they had some consultations. And Fraser, you were in a different job, but I was here at the FPA at the time, and we started having conversations. And ASIC kept making the point we're technology neutral. We don't really care what the document format is, as long as you meet the obligations. And we asked them to clearly spell out in RG90, are infographics all right? And they said, yes, infographics are all right. Are videos all right? Yes, videos are all right. Are audio clips all right? Yes, audio clips are all right. Can we do it digitally? Can it be in an HTML file rather than a paper-based format? Yes, that's fine. And we kept going through a list of different technologies, and they kept saying, yes, that's fine. So since 2017...
As our previous answer, yes.
Yes. So ASIC in their regulatory guides, RG90 talks about the SOA, RG244 talks about the delivery of disclosure obligations, and it talks about being technology neutral. So they've said it's fine. And then the other but that comes up is but what's Africa going to think about it? And we can grab the guys from Africa who are here as well, but they love watching videos of the conversation you have with the client, and what they can do is really quickly point out to the client, actually, that thing you're complaining about, you and the planner talked about it at minute 53.
Yeah, it makes it quite clear.
And you explain back to the planner what that strategy was and why that product was right for you and why you agreed with it and why you understood it met your goals and objectives. What are you complaining about?
Yeah, any dispute resolution is very fast for both Africa or PI for that matter. They either know straight away whether there is a claim or it's not, and it gets settled. So that there's not that ongoing large legal obligations around trying to gather all the evidence is all there. And when the regulators do those file reviews, they do a full file review. It's not just the video, the statement of advice or whatever it might be. It's everything that you've got. So all your file notes, all those sort of things as well. So it's very much around, a complete file note. And just on ASIC, from all the dealings I've had with ASIC over the years, they're not so much the police like they're made out to be. They're actually just the protector of consumers, right? And so most planners that I know are also the protector of consumers. And so they're kind of on the same page to me as a lot of planners. And I know that there's this fear of ASIC when really the fear shouldn't be of ASIC. If you're doing the right thing by your consumers and you're protecting them, that you're on the same page.
No, and I think if you have a look at the action ASIC has taken against financial planners over the years, they're pretty egregious examples of terrible things that financial planners have done to clients. And ASIC should be taking action against those people who are ruining clients' lives and creating a bad reputation for planners. But they're not the bad guys in any of this. And I have a very, very strong and good working relationship with ASIC, and I can ring them up and ask them questions and clarify things, and they're real nice, lovely people.
And one of the things I just wanted to quickly cover too is that we get this question a lot is, it's great if you're doing a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, you can record that online and you've got the client at their house and you in your office. But what about for people coming into offices, people coming back into offices? How do you do a video SOA for in person?
Yes, I mean, it can be as simple as just pointing the camera at the room and making sure you've got both you and the client in there and hit record on a Zoom meeting that you otherwise would have been doing.
Yep.
There's a lot of screen capture technology if you want to get a little bit more sophisticated. But if you're used to using Teams, if you're used to using Zoom, just start up a Zoom meeting and only have one participant in it, which is the room, and share the screen into it, and you're capturing everything.
And probably the final objective I want to get to before we finish this podcast is the concept of recording and that mindset shift that if people aren't currently recording their meetings, they have a fear around, the clients wouldn't want to, and yet every time we talk to people who record their meetings, clients never say no, hardly ever say no.
I think we had one person who'd been recording their meetings for 5 years 2 days ago, and he said he had one client in that 5-year period said they weren't comfortable with the meeting being recorded. That's not the right client for him.
Yeah.
He records his meetings, that's his process. That client is not his client.
Yep, fantastic.
I have a very simple question, and I might be missing something here, but this seems like such a logical solution. It seems like it's almost, for lack of a better example, the Uber of finance, like the Uber that was always something that we should have had, but took so long to get here, or the Airbnb. What has been the delay in if ASIC's never had a sort of a problem with how technology is delivered, and this has been something that's been taking a bit of time to come through? I know you've been talking about this for a long time, Fraser. Is it just how thorough the process has been, or has there been, because it's taken a couple of years to bring this to life for people to start adopting it, what's been the sort of time delay?
So there's two issues in my head, and maybe you've thought of some more, but issue number one is when the Corporations Act came about and statements of advice were put into the law, honestly, the best piece of technology you could use to consistently provide advice to your clients at that time was word processing. And so it was a natural way to deliver documenting your advice to the client was to use Word documents. That made sense at the time. It was
a step up from using the typewriter at the time.
It was. And you could use templates, and it was the most efficient way to do it. The reality is we've had, and it's not today. The quickest and easiest way to create a document today is to pull out your phone, to your point, turn the camera around so it's recording you, and press record. And that's the quickest way to document something today. But the reality is we've had nearly 20 years of constant regulatory change. And so any time a financial planning business has had the opportunity to sit down and actually make a change to their business, it's probably been to implement some piece of regulatory change. You think since 2007, 2008, we've gone through the GFC, so that was chaotic for us. We then had FOFA. We then had the Professional Standards and Education Framework. We had the Life Insurance Framework. We had the Royal Commission. We've had the Royal Commission implementation. I can go on. I mean,
there's been a bit on the plate.
Big ones, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So anytime we've had time or more money,
yeah.
we've had to make regulatory change. So we haven't had time to sit down and think about, is paper still the right way to record?
I also think if we go back to that when FSR came in 2001, the lawyers read through the legislation. They went, this is obviously it's a document. Of course it is. What else could it be? Because everything that legal has done over past, whether it's writing wills or creating contracts, has been on paper.
Yeah.
And so they were charged with the task of creating a document that would suffice to the legislation. And so ever since then, we've been at the mercy of the legal fraternity that says this is how we do things. Now, the fact that it's a statement of advice is not a document. It's not a contract. It doesn't have to be a document. It can be a statement. You can state it, just as we're stating our opinions on the podcast today, without anything in writing. So I think we get stuck in this place. And the compliance teams for AFSLs, they just do what the lawyers say. They just go, well, we've got to make sure that our business model, which is our license, doesn't get taken away, and then we do that through a legal form. So I think what's happened is it's been legally led and not so much consumer led. And the whole purpose of a statement of advice is to provide the client with the relevant information that particular client needs to make an informed decision, right? Whether to proceed with the advice or not proceed with the advice. And that is the purpose of a statement of advice. It's not about producing long documents, which we're about used to. Clients come in, they want advice, they want plans, and we go and give them an SOA because that's the way the lawyers assumed. We need a contract, but it's not a contract. Oh, that's my high horse. I'm getting on my soapbox. Gosh.
It's a good soapbox. I learned a lot from that. Thanks, Fraser.
I'm just like, blah, information. I think we probably should wrap this one up.
We'll wrap Fraser up. That's
why it takes a full day session to train everybody up on.
Somebody turn Fraser's mic down before he gets himself in trouble.
But the training sessions we're doing, we're answering all these questions. We're answering these buts. We're talking to compliance people. We're talking to lawyers. We're talking to PI. But the training session is really about making you comfortable with the process, what you need to actually cover off. And then we do a heap of live action plays. We get the bad video SOAs out of the way in a safe environment with us, and what our members are doing is going away having done 2 or 3 video SOAs in the training session, and they're ready to go back to their office and start doing it with their clients.
Yep, that's
and it's so fantastic that so much rigor is being put into this rather than just being adopted, because if everyone's really thinking about it and thinking about whether it's something they want to do and it's taking a lot of time to think through that and work through that, I don't think that that's a bad thing. Means they really care about the quality of whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'll just repeat what we said at the moment. It's a recording of the meeting with the client. It's not standing in front of a green screen and just speaking out into the world. That is adding additional time to your advice process, the same way that creating a paper-based SOA is. We're talking about recording the meeting. You're having the meeting anyway, writing the advice anyway. Just record it then and there, meet your regulatory obligations, and you're done.
Follow a fairly strict agenda that makes sure you covers your points and actually make your points.
Yep. Save file, share to client, SOA, out the door.
And that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Thanks, Danni. Thanks, Fraser.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our very long micro series of fireside chats We're into day 2. So we're at the FPA Congress. It's the 30th birthday of the FPA's Congress. So it's fantastic to be here. Now, Fraser has darted off and I'm joined by a new co-host. Hey, Clayton.
Hey, how's it going?
And we have a very special guest to kick off the discussions. Hi, William. How you going?
Good, thank you.
So can you, before we dive into your session and what you're talking about at the FPA Day, can you tell everyone who's listening a little bit about what you do? Because it's a bit unique.
Sure. So I'm William Johns. I am the founder of 2 companies, Health and Finance Integrated, which gives advice to people after suffering a complex health condition, and Claim Right, which is a claims platform administration service that makes claims easier for things like NDIS, Centrelink, and insurances. So we do everything.
Fantastic. And you've also had a heritage of being a financial planner.
Correct. Well, I am a financial planner, but I'm also a disability...
So a practicing financial planner,
I am
yeah,
a practicing
excellent.
financial planner.
Wearing many hats.
Wearing many hats, but these days I'm more of a tech head. So people come to me for tech advice, if you like. And I'm not
Fantastic.
talking about like computer advice. I'm talking about like technical...
Yeah, you've got to make that
advice.
clarification these days. No, thank you so much.
That's right.
That's
But also I hold a master's in disability studies from Flinders School of Medicine. So that makes it a little bit better for me when it comes to understanding impairments and disabilities.
I'm so glad you explained all of that, because I would have, I would have got lost in all of your achievements. So thank you. So how did you end up in the claims disability space? What drew you to that particular area?
Back when I started Health and Finance Integrated, we had a great relationship with MS Australia. They put me up as a guy that people with MS should go to. And what happened was I was getting a lot of people seeking my advice after having seen a legal
A lawyer.
a lawyer, legal specialist, etc. And by then it was too late to do any meaningful work, because the way that works is that the lawyer would do the claim, and they do a fantastic job, right? They do a fantastic job, but then the way to get paid is to take the money out of the superannuation system and put it in the lawyer's trust account. The lawyer will take their fee, and they give the residual to the client. And by then, the tax has already been withheld by the fund, and Centrelink and everything else has already factored in that this person has got all this money out of super.
So for a lawyer to get paid, it screws the client.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, but that's the deal. That the lawyer's job is not to kind of preserve the future.
Do the financial planning.
Right.
Yeah.
They're there to execute a transaction efficiently, and that's what they'll do.
And want to get paid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I kind of thought, okay, well, what we really need to do is speak to the lawyers about, the process, and I did, and they kind of listened. But the reality is, financial planning takes a good month, 2 months, and so for a lawyer to kind of say, look, I'm happy to hold on. My payment is going to be pending. And then there is no guarantee, because superannuation is a protected thing from bankruptcy. A lot of these people didn't have any other money. So there was like a trust issue by, lawyer-client issues and all that sort of stuff. And I thought to myself, well, I think we can do this better. And I think we can do it cheaper. How much are you charging? You're charging X percent. I think I can do it for 1/5 of that. And that
Excellent.
And that kind of got me thinking about, how do I measure body impairments really efficiently? Because part of the issue that we were having is that medicos didn't understand the disability definitions. They didn't understand. Somebody's diagnosed with MS, but what does MS mean? Like, is it cognitive impairment? What's the rate of cognitive impairment? If somebody has got heat exhaustion, okay, what does that mean in the workplace? If somebody's got bladder control issues, how often, how frequent? So you needed an occupational physician to interpret what MS really means, or a neurologist to go into it. That meant that there was a lot of money being exchanged at the medical side of things for people to write these reports, a lot of time wasted. And I figured, wait, I know how to do this. I'll create the app, the ecosystem that measures impairments, and we will then generate a report to go to their normal GP, who will look at this and say, gee, this is pretty good, and I'll sign off on it. And that's what happened. So that's the Claim Right that's how we've been able to add efficiencies and reduce costs.
So you're talking about all the whole person impairment measures. That
Right.
are
Within
that
25
you break down,
minutes,
yep.
exactly. Within 25 minutes, we know exactly where the impairment is, how severe it is, and we generate a report that is comprehensive.
Because you take that to 2 or 3 different doctors. I know from my time in insurance, if you take that to 2 or 3 different doctors, you'll have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different measures of whole person impairment on depending on how they've done that sort of measurement. So that's fantastic.
Exactly. And
Centralise that and giving them a little bit of support in calculating that.
exactly. But the thing is, when we designed it, we didn't just design it for the purpose of insurance claims. We designed it for Centrelink and we designed it for NDIS. And so what that meant was I achieved what I set out to achieve when I started the financial planning side, which is I wanted people to have suitable accommodation, stable income, and good care. And so by us being able to, do the claim, often what that meant is that the money was then being used for the purposes of housing, etc., but appropriate housing, paying mortgages, etc. The second thing I wanted to do was ensure that the disability support pension or any other benefits were being paid quickly, and the rate of rejection is 74%. On those. So I wanted to reduce that, and we reduced it. Now we've got a 5% rejection rate.
Whoa!
Which is like 95. So, like, this is Australia-wide, it's 76% rejection, right? Or 74, 76. I wanted to reduce that because I can't understand how we could have a margin of error of like
75%.
75% or something.
We've done this, but we're wrong 75% of the time.
Yeah, like if you're a government body, how could you be proud of a margin of error of 75%? So to me, there was something wrong with the system, and I've discovered that it's the actual impairment ratings and the measurement of impairments and what it means to have a permanent impairment versus a doctor who says this person can't work anymore. It's complicated, right? It's so complicated.
So this comes to your session that you're talking about later today.
Exactly.
And so you're going to be breaking all of that down.
Well, as much as possible. I mean, we've got 45 minutes to kind of break down a whole lot of stuff. But this gets people to start thinking about where the issues are in the system. So maybe they can do their own digging and get them to start thinking about these things from a strategy point of view.
Perfect.
And that's what it's about.
So what are the things in that you've only got 45 minutes, what are the things that are really important what are the pitfalls that you definitely want to avoid in your strategy piece in this disability space?
I think you've got to understand that perhaps financial planners can play a exceptional role in what disability is. And how to remove that disability and create abilities. So it's a matter of, you're disabled if somebody keeps reminding you that you are faced with challenges all the time. And so is there a space where, or room for a financial planner to remove some of those obstacles out of the way of the systems that we're associated with? I'll give you an example of that. So, and we're not talking about disability now, but we'll talk about disabling factors. Let me give you an example. Somebody goes and applies for insurance. They go and see a psychologist because of COVID. The psychologist says, listen, you've got generalized anxiety disorder. And we then get a exclusion for mental health. Okay? So there are 2 obstacles that can be removed by the financial planner in this point. First of all, a generalized anxiety disorder is a permanent condition. The question is this really generalized anxiety disorder, or did the guy just have a little hard time during COVID? And if that is the case, then you would go back to the psychologist and kind of challenge them, push back, say, hey, this is a permanent condition. This guy is fine now. How could it be that he is fine if it's a permanent condition without medications, without therapies? Or it could be what they call adjustment disorder, which is basically burnout. Right. And you think, because when you do something like slap somebody with a generalized anxiety disorder, you need 20 visits, not 1 or 2 to slap somebody with a disorder.
Totally.
Right? And so, guess what? That was last week. We had this case. The psychiatrist came back and he said, well, yeah, you're right. We'll remove that. We'll do. So then they gave the client 2 years exclusion, mental health exclusion, to be reviewed. The next question, if I wanted to push back on that, I would say, okay, under Section 46 of the Disability Discrimination Act, the insurer has 3 ways to discriminate by slapping a exclusion. One of them is that you've got to show me through actuarial data or through medical data or any other data that this person, as part of a general population, is going to have an episode down the track.
Sure,
or
yep.
more likely than. And they might come back with a legitimate data, but it's on them under the DDA to prove to me, otherwise it's discrimination.
So you're every underwriter's best friend.
Well, I think
Yikes! I've been an underwriter. That would scare me.
Right, and so back maybe 6-7 years ago, I took a big company to the Human Rights Commission, and they said the Human Rights Commission said, "You're absolutely right. This is discrimination. It's arbitrary discrimination." And now, of course, if you wanted to do something about that, like in a practical terms, there's an arbitration system. And if you're not happy with the arbitration, then you go to court, and a lot of people won't go to court. But the point is this, is that the financial planner needs to know these little things so they can do business better, and they can remove obstacles.
And serve their client better, ultimately.
Right,
yes.
right. And it kind of makes us cool.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes us scary. And
Yeah.
it makes us, the underdog.
Yeah.
And I like all that.
I've never heard underwriting claims cool underdog. But look, we're reinventing things, right?
Right. This is a professional financial planner.
I interviewed William a while ago, and you've got an amazing backstory, right?
Yeah.
Compared to for even how you got here, which I know is one of the major sort of driving factors for you to describe what it is that you do as what you do. And so it all makes sense in context, and I would welcome anyone to go back through the archives of the XY podcast to listen to that podcast. It's one of the most standout podcasts I was ever a part of. But what you are describing right here and right now is truly what financial planning is, because financial planning is understanding the rules in your subset better than anyone else, including the person you speak to at the government, including the person you speak to at the product provider, including the lawyer that deals with this, the psychologist. And it's not always going to be around health. Right.
Yeah.
There are many different areas to go into, but the thing that I really, really appreciate what it is that you do is that you created your own skill set to become an expert in what you saw as an issue, and find that is financial planning. The level of area, the amount of areas that you can go into and deep dive into, because you know what it took for you to become proficient at what it is that you do? Hard work.
Yeah.
Much more than your graduate diploma, where you learn about how to do a risk assessment, right? That pursuit of a higher skill set, I just so appreciate in any financial planner.
I agree with that. And you find that the best financial planners are financial planners who kind of start being inquisitive about the system.
Absolutely.
Because they identify that the job of a financial planner is to be the conduit between the person and the financial system.
Yep.
And the financial system is not just superannuation or insurance. It's an entire ecosystem.
Oh, yeah.
That includes when somebody gets into hospital, they get you to sign financial consent. Stuff like that. Like, I got into hospital and they got me to said, this and that, and then they gave me a $3,000 bill. And I was thinking to myself, I never signed anything, because I know from my time as a financial planner, I need to sign something to consent to spend money. So I dug up and I found that before any surgery, that the doctor is kind of like a financial planner in a lot of ways, in that they have to get a signature like we get on an SOA. Now, my doctor never got a signature from me. And so therefore, they can't charge me.
Wow.
So I went back to him and I said, hey, I looked at this consent stuff and it sounds like you're a lot like me. I can't charge without having consent.
Yeah.
And you can't charge if you can't. He goes, we stuffed up. Do you want to sign it? Do you want to sign it now?
The business that I've grown for 20 years, I've just realized has been illegal.
Now, listen, I ended up paying the guy something.
But the point is, but it's still the point.
Right.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, I'm in a privileged position in that I'm also the chair of the Certified Financial Planning designation. So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about now is going back into the practice of financial planning in the Certified Financial Planning program. Do we have, we want to move away from, what universities used to teach 20 years ago to something a bit more dynamic to make it more relevant. And people want relevance.
Yes.
So this is relevant.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, great.
William, thank you for joining us in this morning's very early sessions. I've learned a lot. I am going to try and get to your session because it sounds amazing.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast, what we got to call
Mega
it?
mini-series.
Mega mini-series, brought to you from the Financial Planning Association Congress, I should say.
Day 2.
Day 2. I'm losing my mind already. Danni and I are joined by the Honourable Bernie Ripple. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Fantastic to have you along. Now, of course, most of the people know you from your original work that you did in superannuation, the Ripple Report.
Yep. So, it seems quite some time ago now because it was, and it was a major piece of reform, really born out of the Storm financial collapse and born out of thousands of consumers really losing their life savings through mismanagement of schemes and a whole range of other things, and I think at that time it was probably the straw that broke the camel's back, to use that sort of analogy, around the Parliament needing to step in and do more for consumers, and really led to some big thinking around where the future for financial advice and advisors would be. And today, obviously, we're here talking about, what does advice look like in 2030?
Yeah, we're talking about the future. Now, we've been through the past. Now, tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days. You're no longer in a government role. You're sort of working more in financial services. You love the space. You love the technology space. Tell us about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm with Otivo, which is the rebranded Map My Plan. And so we're a self-directed digital advice platform. I'd say we're breaking new ground, and it's always a challenge when you're doing that. You often hear about a lot of talk about innovation, and people say they're constrained and no one innovates. And to some extent, I'd agree. I'd say that this sector hasn't been innovating. There's some good reasons why. It's expensive, and when things work, you just keep doing what you're doing. But we had a really big vision, and we've got a big vision about what the future of advice looks like. And the key thing about that is that right now, only about arguably 10 or 15% of Australians actually get advice. And our thinking is, well, what about the other 85 or even 90% of Australians who need advice? I think the demand's there, but there's a real challenge in terms of how you deliver that on scale, affordably. There's all the things that we already understand. And so our mission really is to be able to deliver that quality advice to any Australian that wants it for the price of a cup of coffee a week. And that's a big step change on how you get there and how you make that real. That's our goal. That's what we've been working on for quite a few years now.
Yeah, certainly appears that the cost of providing advice has gone up a lot in the last few years, and certainly a lot more than a cup of coffee.
Yep.
And also, as we talk about, I guess, the gap in advice, one of the widening gaps and the disparities, I guess, is around when you look at women and their, the advice, and I guess things like the pay gap. And so are there any things that you're doing to address, like in that innovation space, specifically to address those things? Because I think as an industry, and I'm always part of these conversations where we are always looking at innovation, but there's still, I guess, a widening gap in some of those imbalances in super balances, in generic pay. Those things are only increasing, and COVID hasn't sort of helped. Is there anything that you're seeing in that 2030 vision to address those?
Yep.
Gaps?
So there's a fair bit in that, Danni.
Okay, great, good.
So I'll try and unpack a few bits of it sort of sequentially. But look, you're 100% right, and everyone acknowledges it. And there's work being done in terms of gender inequity and pay gaps and superannuation, and it's a consequence of our economy and how we live our lives. And they're really difficult things to fix. So I think for all of us, in terms of I think there's a willingness from a regulatory perspective and Parliament and community. Everyone wants to sort of try to get that balance as close as possible. A lot of work being done, still a lot of work to go. There's no question about that. What can we do, and what are we trying to do through our platform? Probably the simplest way to respond to that would be to say we're gender neutral. What we're really doing is providing a system and technology and a platform which democratises advice. It's really about saying it's open to everyone at a price which is affordable to everyone and can help everyone regardless of gender or family circumstances.
And so it really opens that up, because often the traditional model of advice, the face-to-face, it's expensive for a good reason. Rather than for me to look at these things in terms of, is it cheap or expensive, I say, is it good value? Because it doesn't matter how much you pay. If it's great value, then that's what's important. It's the value proposition. And I've always said to the financial advice sector, you should charge according to value and what's appropriate, whatever that might be. I don't argue if people earn a lot of money. But there's also a really big piece that's needed to help people on that life journey, that financial journey, on how do they access it, how do they do it. And I think if we look at 2030 as the benchmark, I'm looking at what does an advisor look like. Well, I'd say just very simply, she will be a lot younger than what's around today in terms of an advisor, the average age, also much better educated. It'll be university education, and it'll be someone who's come to the industry direct, not from another sector. So I think that's quite bright, and I think that the demand means that we're going to have a lot more service needed for people providing advice directly, face-to-face, expensive, time-consuming, complicated, and a really big role to play for digital platforms and technology to support that and begin that journey for people. And there's plenty of good examples, but I'll...
Yeah, 100%. And obviously the session that you were involved in here at the Congress was about that, 2030, the looking forward in what it might look like. Technology to me has done a good job at looking at efficiencies. It's done a good job at looking at, process. Outside of financial services software, there's other types of technology that does some great stuff in medical fields. There's some great technology that's used in looking at capacity with a human. There's some great stuff that looks at how does somebody have an intimate connection with the technology. There's dating apps that have worked this sort of stuff out. Are we still going to start to see these other types of technologies then move into advice?
Absolutely, and they're already here. I'd like to say that Otivo actually does a lot of that. So there's two key components to make it simple. One is dealing with complexity. We live in a very complex world. It's not getting simpler. It's actually getting more complex. And that complexity and that interconnectivity is what can really make a difference to someone who's seeking an answer to a simple question is, what do I do next? So in terms of financial life, what do I do next? My pay's coming in. I've had a windfall. I've had a big cost. What do I do next? And so that's where the technology can really help, and it can help to give you advice and nudges and provide options, and people still need to make decisions for themselves, but you need to empower people. That's the financial literacy piece, right? How does someone get empowered? Well, they need to be financially literate around what's happening in their lives. The other really important piece around the technology question is really that it becomes so integrated in your life that you're no longer asking the question. And so there's lots of examples of that. I mean, no one thinks twice about, texting or Snapchatting or everything else. That's just part of normal life. When you want to transfer even large sums of money to someone, you just get on your phone, you do it instantly right in front of them. We don't even question that as something. It's integrated into every part of our daily life. Financial advice is not yet, but it will be. And the power of that will mean that's the empowerment. That's what it will help people do to make decisions. And then whether they choose to just focus on the platform that has their critical data, they won't even need to enter it manually. We do direct connections and drop downs from your bank accounts, from your super fund, from how much you're earning, etc., etc. So the tech's already there. The big data drives it, and it'll help to inform individuals on making better and better decisions.
So when do you start to because all of those add-ons to our lives and enhance our lives, and we kind of just seamlessly work with, they become part of our lives because they're kind of put into our world at a certain time and quite early in our journey, whereas advice we used to all have Dolomite accounts or an equivalent, so that was probably the sort of the first integrate. That now that's gone, and then suddenly people get to an age and they're like, this advice is a big jump. And it's really interesting. We did a piece of work with Morningstar recently around this escalating consumer trend of, I want almost this transactional, early in someone's journey, they perhaps want a transactional relationship with an advisor, which is quite difficult under the current sort of environment. But I want to sort of partake in these apps that you talk about and then probably go and foster this relationship, and I want to do it together for a period of time. When do you introduce advice financial concepts, literacy, so that they do become part of someone's world and not this big leap that they've got to make at some stage? Because, that would be really interesting to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, look, that's quite insightful in terms of that process, and we did sort of just touch on this in the panel session. The answer to that, if we look forward, is that there is no start point. It happens seamlessly. You don't even know you're getting the advice.
Precisely.
That's at the point where the technology really makes that difference. And that's happening now already. So, for example, a lot of people have got an app for their super fund, and so they get nudges from their super fund in terms of their balance when a deposit's been made. So you're starting to engage.
Or a raise account, you're doing it yourself without any advice at all, and that's
absolutely.
not ideal.
Yeah, so there's lots of platforms which are interacting with our life that we you either have a choice or not a choice, but we are in a compulsory system in Australia in terms of our superannuation.
Yeah.
And so that is the base, and then you look at our digital life in a cashless economy. We're almost there. It's not completely cashless, but we're as close as we've ever been, and by 2030 maybe we are, maybe we're not. But this seamlessness around it means that no one's getting advice anymore. It's just part of every day. Right now, the old system, which has got a great and bright future, which is that at some point in my life, I feel I have enough of complexity and financial status or well-being. I've saved enough money perhaps, or I've got a large super balance, where I go and see someone. I make a conscious decision. I ring up, make an appointment, in 3 weeks' time we'll go and spend an hour and a half, and that'll be our first appointment. And there's this whole sort of very long, detailed, complex. It's very hard for people to begin that journey, and it usually happens a little bit later in life, post 30 or 40, roughly speaking, right? It's not an absolute. What I'm talking about is introducing systems and platforms and technology to assist humans in having that happen every day for them in the background seamlessly, and then the nudges come forward.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the time the consumer expectation is, I don't have enough to go to a financial planner yet. I don't have enough to go to, and then all of a sudden we think we've got enough, and now we're going to go. And so to be able to provide that experience on the way through, I think is really important. I think it's really important to be able to make those minuscule steps. And to some of your points before, if you look back where we were 10 years ago, we've come a long way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've come a long way, and so it's exciting to think about what the future could be. Yeah,
I did a lot of presentations over the last 2 decades around change and looking at technology and technology change and all those sort of things. And I look back and almost laugh at some of those early presentations, talking about, booking a hotel on the telephone, and just reminding people that the first real smartphone, the iPhone, was only 2007. Oh my God, that's just like yesterday. And so we've come a long, long way, but it's big leaps forward. So there's periods where we just sort of, everyone argues and debates over whether we will or won't, and then it just happens. And no one talks about it anymore because it's just part of your ordinary life.
Yeah.
People talk about EVs, like, I'm not going to get one, or I'm going to get one, or that's not going to happen. Or I say to them,
suddenly they stop producing any other car.
And he's spot on.
The decision's made for you.
Yes.
You've got a bike or you've got an EV.
Yeah, and suddenly they're just everywhere, right? And there's lots of evidence of this through history. I love there's this great image of New York City in 1911, and it's about 95% horses. There's horse poo and carriages, and it's a beautiful old photo. And there's 2 cars. You can just see these 2 old cars just sitting in there. And then there's another photo, which is 1921, and it's all cars, and there's 2 horses, and you think, oh my God. And it can happen to you really fast. And I think that's, in a sense, what we're talking about here today, that this 2020 vision, people need to open up their imagination to what it can be and what it will be.
What excites you the most out of that 2030 vision? Like, what do you go that you could share with the listeners and go, look, we're really excited about this. You've obviously got a more integrated model than an advisor might have, but what might you share with advisors to go, this is the thing you should really jump on and piggyback on?
Yeah, what really excites me about that vision of 2030 is that people have got back control of their own data and their own financial well-being. Financial well-being is, and the reason I say that is because financial well-being is not about how much you've got, it's about understanding what to do the best with what you've got. We've all heard the stories that somebody on a very low income is the happiest person in the world and they're financially really secure, and somebody who earns many, many multiples more is very unhappy and they're dead broke. And so really this is about democratization and empowering people, and technology can deliver that because it gives you back your information and gives it back to you in a form that makes sense. Because right now we have too much information. Right now I couldn't tell you, all. If you ask me stuff about my own financial, I'd be struggling.
Are you saying you got too much money, Bernie? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't know where's where and what's what. There's just so much. But when I use the platform, it gives me visual snapshots. It tells me on a day-to-day basis. It's like looking at your banking app, and you go straight to your account summary, and you go, oh, okay, I know where I'm at today. I know, all those.
Cut through to the important things that you actually need to know, rather than the haze of.
So that's what's exciting.
That is exciting. I love the fact of bringing the emotional world and the logical world together, and giving people control because they can see and visually understand where everything's at. Bernie, thank you so much for dropping by the podcast bar. Here at the Congress. Really appreciate you dropping your insights from your amazing session this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Absolute
Bernie.
pleasure. Thanks, Dan.